My name is Jonathan. I graduated from a vocational school and have been working as a caregiver for the last 14 years. I met my wife Tatiana through my friends, and we've been married for 5 years now. After getting married, we lived alone for a while, but after some time we ended up moving together with my in-laws. At the time, I didn't anticipate how my wife would change. I moved in with Tatiana's parents because her mother had broken a bone. Even after she was discharged from the hospital, she needed someone to help take care of her. My father-in-law wasn't confident in his abilities to take care of her himself, so I heard they were considering moving to a senior home. But since senior homes are expensive, Tatiana decided I will move in with her parents and take care of her mother. Not that she asked me how I felt about it. On top of everything, I ended up moving in with them by myself. Since my parents had already passed away, my in-laws loved me as if I was their own son. I wasn't against helping take care of them, but the fact it was decided without my say made me uncomfortable. My mother-in-law loved living in their home, which was full of memories for her, and my father-in-law was happy being together with the wife he loved so dearly, so I was glad that by me helping out they wouldn't have to move. But their house was an hour drive from where I lived with Tatiana, and a 2-hour drive from my work. So to be able to focus on taking care of my mother-in-law, I had to leave the place I worked at for 14 years. It was impossible for me to quit so suddenly, but after I spoke with my bosses, they helped me adjust my work schedule for my final months. I moved in with my in-laws as soon as my mother-in-law was discharged from the hospital. After she was discharged, I made sure to avoid any very late or early shifts. While I was at work, my father-in-law would do what he could to help out. When I first moved in with my in-laws, my wife would visit us every weekend. But she slowly started showing up less and less, and eventually she'd only come once a month. Tatiana no longer comes to visit, huh? She should move here too. Recently, my father-in-law has been saying that a lot. My wife's company has a branch near her parents' house, so she requested to be transferred there. Once they accept my transfer request, I'll move in to live with you, was what she kept saying. But 6 months passed and there was no progress with the transfer. Tatiana would always come up with excuses like, it's not the right time, and things are busy at work, so they won't let me transfer now. I thought it was a bit suspicious, but I trusted her. 2 months later, my mother-in-law died suddenly from pneumonia. Tatiana never visited, even when her mother was in critical condition, nor did she help with the funeral. She once whispered to me secretly, "I'm glad my mom went first." Tatiana smiled as she said that. I pretended I couldn't hear, but I guessed that since all the family property was under her father's name, if he had passed away first, things might have been more complicated with the inheritance procedure. I resented my wife for valuing her inheritance more than her parents' lives. I ignored her and just focused on helping my father-in-law with the funeral proceedings. The funeral memorial service went by without a hitch. The days went by. Just when I was able to catch my breath, my father-in-law said something I never expected him to. "Why don't we stop living together?" I believed that Tatiana would be transferred soon, and I thought we would live as a trio with my father-in-law, so his words were a bolt from the blue. Since his wife passed away, my father-in-law was getting weaker and weaker, so I was against leaving him on his own. So I said to him, "I want to keep living with you. I'll be too worried to leave you alone. I'm sure Tatiana will be transferred soon." I tried to convince him. He said, "I'll live on my own. Don't worry about me. Divorce Tatiana and live on your own as well." I replied, "Divorce? Why won't we live together, the three of us?" No matter what I said, my father-in-law wanted me to divorce his daughter. "I'm sure if you go to visit Tatiana at your house, you'll understand." Honestly, since Tatiana stopped visiting so often, I've thought to myself many times that I should go to our old home. But since my mother-in-law wasn't feeling well, I never made it. "If you ever need anything, don't waste your time going to our home. Just let me know and I'll bring it to you. I leave my parents in your hands," Tatiana would always say to me. I would try to tell her that even her parents want me to visit her, but every time I would bring up visiting, she would come up with some reason for me not to, and so I haven't gone back home even once since I moved in with my in-laws. "We haven't seen Tatiana in so long. Aren't you sad not being able to see her?" "I'm fine, so why don't you go back home sometimes?" It seemed like my father-in-law was worried about me. It's true, we haven't spent any time as a couple together recently. I was curious what he meant when he said I would understand if I went back home. One day, hoping to surprise Tatiana, I went back home while she was at work. I was shocked. When I got home, I saw something I never anticipated. "Huh? What's this?" I was so surprised I said that out loud without realizing it. When I opened the door, I saw a pair of men's shoes that weren't mine. Worried that someone might be in the house, I walked into the living room and saw underwear and clothes thrown all over the floor. It was such a mess I could barely enter the room. Since I moved in with my in-laws, my home had changed. I had a feeling my wife cheated on me, but I didn't have proof. I knew I had to collect evidence now, while no one was at home. I walked around the house and took photos. As I was doing so, I saw a watch I recognized on the floor, and remembered my watch case. I hadn't worn any of my watches in a while, and I completely forgot that I had left my watches in their case in the closet. Going to the closet, I pulled out my case and saw that it was completely empty. I took a photo of the empty case and then checked our shared bank account. We had saved up nearly $25,000, but now barely $2 were left. My mind went blank. I knew that if my wife returned with the owner of those men's shoes, things would get complicated, so I went back to my in-laws' house. My father-in-law had been waiting for me. "How did it go? Do you understand why I said you should break up with Tatiana?" were the first words he said to me. All I could do was nod. "Then come on, fill out the divorce papers," he said. "But I don't like this. I care about you as if you were my own father. Even if Tatiana has done something wrong, I still want you to be my father." Those were my honest feelings. I couldn't leave my father-in-law on his own. He felt how genuine I was. In order to prepare for what might happen next, we decided we should collect evidence of what Tatiana had done, so we hired a private investigator. Unfortunately, the report we got back from the private investigator was just as we had expected. After my father-in-law saw the report, he began acting strangely. He would do things like asking when we'd eat lunch an hour after we had eaten, or saying we should prepare something for Tatiana when she never said she would visit us. After he acted like this for a few days, I realized there must be symptoms of dementia, so I called Tatiana. Her reply was, "Huh? Really? Dad has dementia? I'll come visit this weekend." She sounded worried, but also strangely happy. When I told my father-in-law that Tatiana would be coming to visit that weekend, he looked incredibly happy. I thought I should take him to the hospital the beginning of next week, and I wondered whether Tatiana should see him in the state he's in. But I was sure he wanted to meet her. That Sunday, Tatiana brought something with her when she came over. "Dad, are you all right? I heard you haven't been feeling well recently," Tatiana said kindly while looking at her father's face. He replied with a smile. "We're having spaghetti for dinner tonight. I made sure not to put peppers in the sauce, just how you like it." Recently, my father-in-law would repeat that Tatiana loves spaghetti every day. It must have been her favorite food when she was a kid. Since he mentioned taking out the peppers, which Tatiana eats now with no problem, he must be remembering her as a child. Repeating the same thing over and over, it's definitely dementia. With a cruel look on her face, Tatiana said, "There's no need for dinner. I'm going home." She claimed to have to go to work early the next day. I walked her to the front door and she handed me an envelope. "Fill this out," she said, and walked away. After this, I tried calling Tatiana countless times, but she never picked up. She'd abandoned our home as well. I got in touch with her work, but they said she had quit the week prior. No one knew where she had gone. 5 years later, I suddenly saw her. "What are you doing here?" She seemed surprised to see me. "Why, today is Father's funeral. Of course I'm here." We were both at the funeral hall. It seemed she had quietly slipped in between other attendees. She replied, "We're divorced, so he has nothing to do with you anymore, right? Leave. I'm his only daughter, so I will inherit all his property." She began to laugh. Hearing what she said, I began to laugh as well. "What are you talking about?" Looking at my confused wife, I revealed the truth. "The one who doesn't belong here is you. We divorced, yes, but Father doesn't consider you his daughter." "Huh? What are you talking about? There's no way that old man with dementia would ever say anything like that," she slammed back at me. "What? Father never had dementia." Tatiana looked shocked and kept repeating that I'm wrong. "Sorry to break it to you, but Father officially adopted me, so I'm the one who will inherit all his property." "What a shame you won't get any of it," I said to her. "Adopted you?" she burst out in a loud voice. After Tatiana disappeared, I continued living with my father-in-law and he suggested adopting me. We were getting noisy, so the staff suggested we go outside. I told her we should talk about this after the funeral is over, and we arranged to meet the next day. When we met, I revealed that the only thing Tatiana had to inherit was her parents' vacation home in Maine. "It's written here that you'll inherit the house in Maine," I said to Tatiana while showing her the will. She replied, "Dad had a lot of money from investments, so why do I only get the place in Maine?" She began mumbling to herself. When I first began taking care of him 5 years ago, Father said he would give me a gift to pay me back. He used all his money to remodel his home, which he left for me as a gift, so now there is none left. The fact is, my father-in-law had given me all his money while he was still alive, which is why none was left in the will. His home was put under my name, and both of us decided together that we should spend the money on remodeling, which is why nothing was left for Tatiana to inherit. "But he had life insurance, right? I have the right to receive the money from that." We knew Tatiana would want money, so we had changed the recipient of the life insurance sum to be me as well. Not one single penny was left for her. As I explained this to her, I added, "But you'll have the house in Maine, isn't that great?" She smiled back. "That's true. I've received enough. I leave you to take care of the rest. From now on, we are strangers to each other. Bye." She left looking satisfied with herself. Seeing her like that, it was so hard for me not to laugh. The reason my father-in-law left so much for me is because something that had happened when I thought he had dementia. After Tatiana left the house that final time, I went back to the kitchen to eat dinner with my father-in-law. He saw the envelope Tatiana had given me and pointed at it. "What's inside there?" he asked. I decided we should eat dinner before I checked, so I began cooking. "I was right. What is she even thinking?" I heard from behind me. Shocked, I turned around and saw him sternly holding up the envelope in one hand. In his other hand were divorce papers. "Huh? Is everything okay?" Hearing how concerned my voice sounded, my father-in-law said, I'm sorry, Jonathan. I really did my best with the acting." He began laughing loudly while joking, hitting my shoulder. Seeing him that energetic, I was so surprised and relieved, tears began rolling down my face and I hugged him tightly. He apologized to me many times and explained everything. He was so shocked about Tatiana's affair that he decided he would pretend he has dementia in order to make Tatiana and I divorce so that he could then secretly adopt me. It seems he had noticed that Tatiana was having an affair a while back. He had actually witnessed her talking secretly on the phone with her lover on the day of her mother's funeral, but he didn't have any clear proof. At the time, I really trusted her and believed that she would move in with us. He told me to go back to our home so I would realize what was going on. It seems he even assisted the private investigator we had hired. I was embarrassed to say I had no idea about the affair. After we received the evidence from the private investigator, he wasn't surprised. We thought we would use the evidence against Tatiana during the divorce, but before we could do that, she disappeared. So in order to trap Tatiana, my father-in-law changed his will only to leave her his vacation home in Maine. He had really taken care of me until the very end. After he passed away, I found a caregiver job near our home. Though 6 years had passed since I last worked, my muscle memory was evident. I gradually got used to my new job and enjoyed my life overall. Around 6 months after my father-in-law's funeral, I checked my phone after finishing work and saw I had a missed call from Tatiana. I had a feeling she'd call. "Hey, what the hell is with this place? It was super hard to reach, and now that we finally got here, the whole house is filled with spider webs," Tatiana began shouting before even I could manage to open my mouth. I burst out laughing. "Of course! No one's been there since your mother broke her bone. If you don't care to clean it up first, there's no way you can spend the night there," I said to her. "I don't need a place like this. You take it," she replied. "All inheritance negotiations are already over," I said and hung up the phone. I rejected all of her calls. She's tried emailing me and threatening to sue me, but I've ignored everything. She knew I was living at her parents' old house, so to avoid seeing her, I rented it out and moved elsewhere. As I expected, she went to her parents' old house to find me, but the tenant called the police on her and they took her away. I'm living further away from my workplace now, but I don't mind the commute. I hope I meet many more wonderful people through my job as a caregiver.